The Foucault pendulum experiment is a hoax. This is a Quora article by Moises Alvares, March 2020. Here I will answer why the Foucault pendulum experiment is a hoax. It's all about the initial conditions. When someone tries to explain the operating principle of the Foucault pendulum, a small pendulum on a rotating platform is usually shown so that the person understands how the plane of oscillation changes with respect to the platform. In this analogous demonstration, it is possible to understand how an observer who is on top of the platform and turning with it will see the oscillation plane of the pendulum changing place as time passes, and also comes to understand that it's not the pendulum that is changing its direction of oscillation, but it's the platform that turns. That is very good, but you will notice that in any bibliography, shame or explanatory videos of the methodology to perform this analogous demonstration, it is always necessary that the pendulum be oscillated first, and then the platform that represents the Earth begins to rotate. It is here that the human intellect manifests and analyzed the following. According to the previous analogous demonstration, we have that before starting the Foucault pendulum experiment, the Earth is stationary like the platform in the analogous demonstration, and just after the pendulum is released, the Earth begins to rotate just like the platform. And so we see the pendulum swing plane spin as the Earth moves under it. Wait, what? As you can see here is the big problem. The analogous demonstration does not correspond to what happens in the actual experiment, because the Earth is supposedly always perpetually rotating. The true analogous demonstration is this. The pendulum must be released when the platform is already rotating, and the pendulum must also be rotating with the platform and its same angular velocity. This makes a big difference. If you carry out the analogous experiment in this way, you will discover for yourself that the movement that is making the Foucault pendulum in exhibitions of different museums and universities of the world is not the movement that would make a pendulum that was swinging in a rotating Earth. As I said before, initial conditions. 1. If the pendulum begins to swing while the platform is static, it will continue to swing in that same direction once the platform begins to rotate. Therefore, an observer located in a non-inertial reference frame that rotates with the platform will see that the pendulum oscillation plane appears to rotate. 2. But if the pendulum is released when both platforms and pendulum are already rotating, that the pendulum will retain the initial tangential velocity it acquired from rotating together with the platform, and this tangential velocity is given by the angular velocity times radius. Therefore, it will not oscillate independently of the platform rotation. It will not behave as in the previous case. The non-inertial observer won't see the oscillation plane rotating. Consider the Foucault pendulum was built with materials that were on the Earth spinning with the Earth. It was installed on the Earth while the Earth was spinning, and just before being released, the pendulum was spinning along with the Earth. In other words, the building, the people inside the building, and the pendulum are spinning at the same velocity as the Earth before and after being released, and nothing and no one can ever escape the constant velocity. No one can permanently escape the inertia of a moving Earth unless it leaves the Earth in a rocket. But when the Foucault's deceiving pendulum is released and begins to oscillate, something magical occurs. The pendulum escapes the initial tangential velocity and becomes totally independent of it in the same way as in the demonstration. But we know that in the demonstration, the movement of the oscillation plane of the pendulum is independent of the movement of the platform, because the platform begins to rotate after the pendulum is already in oscillation. A clockwise movement of the pendulum's oscillation plane depends on the absence of a link between the tangential velocity caused by the inertia of the Earth's rotation and the oscillating pendulum. That is what scientists are saying when they say the pendulum is not linked to Earth. Now understand the ridiculousness of this approach. Scientists also say that you are a prisoner of the rotational inertia, tangential velocity of the Earth, and therefore do not feel the movement of the Earth because you are spinning at a constant velocity with the Earth, and not only you, but every object that is inside the Earth, including the pendulum. However, proponents of this pseudoscience also say that the pendulum behaves the way it does because it is not linked to the Earth while swinging, just as in the analogous demonstration. But before being swung, it was linked to the Earth, and after being swung, it is also attached to the cable that holds it, and the cable is attached to the roof of the building, and the roof is attached to the walls, and the walls to the foundation, and the foundation is firmly attached to the Earth. Therefore, the pendulum and any body that is inside the Earth and rotating with the Earth retains its inertial tangential velocity due to the rotation of the Earth by inertia, that is, in the first moment when the pendulum is released, it has two motion vectors. One, the initial tangential velocity vector by inertia of the Earth. Two, the swing direction vector of the pendulum. Science, or better say pseudoscience, claims that only vector 2 is acting in the movement of the pendulum, which is impossible. In short, even if the Earth were indeed rotating on its axis, an experiment like Foucault pendulum experiment was unable to detect the rotation of the Earth. In other words, the oscillation plane would not change its position over time at any latitude. The pendulum has a mechanism capable of simulating the rotation of the oscillation plane, designed to operate at different latitudes, and thus complete the deceptive game in the minds of the public. So, as we can see, the Foucault pendulum experiment is a fraud.